interesting, looking at your career and various players, and I don't know if this is something unique to golf or whether it can transpire into business, but it seems like all your employers, you left each employer with a blessing and their support to kind of almost go on to the next player and then go on to a bigger player, and then of course, ultimately, just like you've just said then, Raymond Floyd, you've gone with his blessing to go to the biggest player, Tiger Woods. I mean, talk me through that. It's you're working for an absolute phenomenon now in Tiger.
Yeah, I mean, look, I went to the 1999 Darrell Ryder Open. It was the first tournament of the year that Raymond was playing in. He didn't play any tournaments on the West Coast that year. And the week before the LA Open, Tiger had fired his caddy, which I didn't know until I got to Miami. And, the buzz around the caddy yard that week was Tiger just fired his caddy. He wasn't playing that week in that tournament, but he fired his caddy the week before. I didn't think anything of it. I mean, he was only, he burst onto the scene, as you know, but he was somewhat quiet in 1998 after his initial start on the tour in 96 and 97. So, I didn't, it was never crossed my mind that I'd be caddying for him, but, I was in my hotel room in Miami and the phone rang one night and it was him. And it's another strange sort of story because I've got a mate of mine that can imitate him to an absolute T as far as the voice goes, of course, over the phone. And it was late. I'd flown in from New Zealand. It was Wednesday night. And I'd just, the day before, flown in from New Zealand to caddy in Miami. As tired as you are. And so I just thought, I didn't think it was Tiger. I thought it was my mate Bob having me on. So I just, told him to F off and put the phone down. And it rang again and the same sort of thing. I gave him the same sort of blast. It's like I'm, da-da-da. And then the third time I thought, maybe it's not Bob. And it was Tiger. And right there, we just got off to such a great start. He just loved my attitude right from the start. At the completion of that tournament, I drove up to Orlando where the next tournament was and went to Tiger's place, and he asked me what I caddied for him, and it wasn't something I decided on straight away, to be honest. It was 1999, and actually I was kind of thinking in 2000 that was going to be my last year of caddying for one reason or another. And so, I didn't say yes straight away, but I gave it some serious thought, and I talked to my dad about it, and I actually called Alan James and so forth. And, sure enough, I took the job, and, of course, the rest was history. But, like, to be able to caddy for someone, to say that you've caddied for someone that, he's the greatest player that's ever played the game. I mean, there's always the argument, who's the greatest player, Jack Nicklaus or Tiger Woods, and we base that on major championships won. But anyone that's played in the Tiger Woods era knows that he's the greatest player that's ever played the game. No one's played golf like he has and been, set the benchmark as far as, all the records that he's set along the way. And, to be part of that for, that period of time from, 2000 to 2005 was just, like, it's hard to fathom that a guy can play that well, that often. It was incredible. I could go on about it for weeks, sort of thing. But that opportunity.
It's interesting. I'm watching Michael Jordan, The Last Dance, on Netflix at the moment, and Jordan. I mean, these are super talented guys, but I guess for us, we just see them on the basketball court or the golf course. I mean, Jordan was an incredibly hard worker, and I assume Tiger, from what I've read, Tiger was an incredibly hard worker as well off the course.
Look, Leo, to reach that kind of level of consistency in your performance as a professional golfer, the average person would have no idea how much work that takes. Like, to play at that level, that consistent as he did for all those years, the number one golfer in the world for that many years in a row. You look at the number one ranking now, how it changes so often when you consider how long he held that ranking for and how many tournaments per year he won and how he featured in the majors. That didn't come by chance. That came from, the more I practice, the luckier I get, sort of thing. I mean, he was religiously hard worker. But one thing that he was different to every player that I'd carried for is the way he went about his practice. He practiced very different to any other player as far as the shots that he had hit, the concentration level on the practice tee. He didn't hit as many, like when I say he practiced a lot, I'm talking more in hours, not so much in the number of balls hit. Just like I was talking to someone yesterday, we would be on the range, regularly in Orlando at Isleworth where he plays, or where he did play. And one of his practice mates was a guy called Charles Howell III, tour pro, very successful tour pro. For every 3 balls Charles would hit on the range, Tiger would hit 1, because every shot he'd hit would have a purpose, it would have a meaning, he'd have a, he'd see the shot, but he'd focus on every shot. He was a deep practicer, and he'd practice all different shots. And one of his great practice drills was he'd choose a flag on the range, and he'd ask me, how far is that flag there? Okay, that's 150, that flag there. And he'd hit every club in the bag to that flag with a full swing, from a sand iron to a driver. And that's where he developed that. One of the statistics that a lot of people may not be aware of, but when he was playing on the tour, he was 10 to 15% better than anyone on the tour at being pin high. And how did he become so good at hitting the ball pin high? How did he have such good feel? Is that he practiced every club. I mean, and he would practice from, at 200 yards and work out how to hit a sand iron 200 yards. Now, I mean, you try and do that. He would hood that thing so much and hit the biggest hook you could ever hit with a sand iron. Hit it 200 yards. It was phenomenal. But that's where he learned that such good hands to control the ball. And also, he practiced out of the rough a lot. I mean, I've never caddied for a guy that would purposely practice out of the rough. Now, I talked to Jack Nicklaus about this one time, and Jack said, well, that's actually, I wouldn't do that, Jack would say, because I don't intend on hitting it in the rough. And, so there's that different philosophy. Well, Tiger, was never the straightest driver of the golf ball. He was obviously long, was never straight, but he became proficient. Like, the best part of his game that no one really knew much about, or why he was so good, he was the best player by a mile out of the rough. He hit the ball pin high so often out of the rough. And why did he do that? Because he practiced out of the rough. Now, how many guys have you seen, Leo, that go to the golf course and practice out of the rough? I mean, you just don't see it. And he did. I mean, he practiced, he every day and every practice session, he would hit some golf shots from a position that you wouldn't believe. He'd go and put himself under a tree on his knees and try and hit a 4-iron, sort of thing. And, one of the greatest golf shots you've ever seen in your life was that 3-iron at Hazeltine on the 18th hole at that fairway bunker. An absolutely impossible shot, but that's when Ernie Els went up the green, put the white towel down and just said, I surrender. But he would do things like that for practice. He would go into a bunker on the golf course and he'd say, Stevie, give me four balls here, and let's see if I can get one of these balls out of this bunker. And the bunker's been designed to hit an 8 or 9 iron out of from the centre. Great bunkers, and including ones like at Paraparaumu Beach. They have a lip that's designed to only get a certain club out of the bunker. That's what makes great fairway bunkers. And he would challenge that with a club that you got no chance to hit it out of. But he would do that every day. It might not be that. And he'd hit shots out of hazards, water shots. He'd hit them. He would, over the period of a year, would hit so many different golf balls from so many unusual spots. That's why he hit so many miraculous shots, because when he got one of these shots, he'd done it before. I mean, it was just, but going back to caddying for Tiger Woods, just the opportunity, it's just amazing to stand there side by side and be part of golf history. A guy that, he was just a phenomenal player.
Now, you told me a story when you were down just before Christmas time. We were discussing celebrating success and taking that time to reflect and enjoy the moment. And you told me a story about Tiger Woods. I think it was at the Bay Hill Invitational. And it was around hitting a shot to the last green. I think it was a 5-iron to the last green that he wasn't particularly happy with.
He won that tournament, a record amount of times in that. And so one Sunday there, he held it was a 45 to 50 footer putt, that big curling left to right putt on 18. He held that putt to win the tournament, having put a second shot with a 5-iron over there. So he lived in Orlando. In fact, he was only about 10 minutes from Bay Hill. So, I went back to the car and he had to do the presentation and he had to do all the media and everything that goes along with winning a golf tournament. And I'm sitting in the car just waiting for him, no problem. And then we drive back to Isleworth, where he lives. You know, you'd be thinking that we're going to go out and have a nice steak for dinner, or, you know, a couple of beers or whatever that. And we pull into the garage and that, and he gets out of the car. He's still got his spikes on, into the golf cart, put the clubs on the back seat. We're out to the range there. It was about 8 o'clock at night, dark about 9:30. He must have hit 155 irons trying to, that shot that he hit on the 18th hole, he's trying to hit a fade into that flag, and he pulled a little bit. I mean, he's just won the golf tournament, and now there is no pro in the world would go and do that. You know, he was the ultimate perfectionist. And his great line that he always said to me is that I feel that one day I want to own my swing and not rent my swing. He believed that at some point in time that you could stand over a golf ball, make the same swing every time. Now, given all that comes along with your body feels different every day, you know, you put your hands slightly on the, you know, you're never the same physically 2 days in a row or mentally, but he believed that you could. And that was, you know, he believed that one day I'm going to own my swing, I'm not renting it. And he was a perfectionist. I mean, look, I could tell you so many funny stories. That year that Grant Waite and Tiger had that unbelievable battle at
Canadian Open, wasn't it?
Canadian Open, Glen Abbey and that. On the Tiger hit that extraordinary shot on the Sunday. On the Saturday night, we're going down the Queen's Highway back into Toronto, where we're staying in a hotel. And I used to do all the driving, like drive the car, because he couldn't drive properly. And we're just going down the freeway, and he said, "Steve, pull over." Or, you know, pull over. He goes out, we get out of the car, and he gets the club out of the back. He's swinging on the side of the QE2 freeway. He just had a swing thought, and it couldn't wait till we got back to the hotel or wherever. He had to do it right now on the side of the highway. I'll never forget it. I mean, you know, he was just so engrossed in the game, and, you know, a thought would come to his head, and it had to be now. You know, that was just like that 5-iron at Bay Hill. We go back, you know, instead of celebrating, we're on the range till it's dark, you know, 5-irons.
I think it was
special.
It was Torrey Pines in 2009. You know, obviously coming down that last, it was either the last hole or the penultimate last hole. And Tiger's in the middle of his swing, and I think you guys have been debating between an 8 and a 9 iron. And he's at the top of his swing, about to come down, and you've stopped him. And you've said that the wind's changed or something. So you felt a puff, and you subbed the club out, and he absolutely stiffed it. And of course, the rest is history. At what point did you have the confidence, or did you feel you had the confidence to call Tiger off a shot? I mean, that's an incredible thing, not only to make that call, but for Tiger to stop in mid-swing.
Well, I mean, yeah, look, I mean, he was absolutely freakish at that, how he could stop mid-swing. I mean, actually stop. You can't do it. You try it yourself. Anyone that knows golf, you try and do that, actually start and stop. To have someone tell you to stop, you can't. And he could stop at any point in the swing, just freeze. And that was one of the great things that came for him, that you could actually do that. And he was well aware that could come at any time, that I would say, you know, hey, Tiger. And he would know that something's changed in that. So, but yeah, I mean, that was just something, another thing that he could do that nobody else could do. Is just like, I mean, you know, okay, you could pull away from the ball, you know, but you actually standing over the ball and actually stop. I mean, it's just impossible to do, and especially with the speed he was swinging at.
Now, 2002, Paraparaumu Beach, the New Zealand Open, your home course, you're caddying for the world's #1 golfer at his absolute peak, and you've got the opportunity to bring him home to your course and to caddy in a New Zealand Open. Talk us through that week. I mean, it's a famous week for our golf club. It's also in many ways an infamous week.
Yeah, look, I mean, personally, you know, I always had this idea when I first started caddying for Tiger, and well, actually, the idea came when I was caddying for Greg Norman. You know, I always just think when I was a youngster, imagine caddying at Paraparaumu Beach for Greg Norman, if I could get him to come here. But I won't get into the details, but he only ever played New Zealand once and would never come back here. So that wasn't a reality. So that same dream sort of came with Tiger as well. You know, that wonder if I could ever get him to come back here. And of course, a group of individuals had an idea about making a proposal to get Tiger here and that, and he was, he wanted to do it. So a lot went into it, obviously, and there was some good and some bad, and on how it all eventuated. But that was nothing. I had nothing to do with that side of it. I mean, I'm Tiger Woods' caddy, and I'm here trying to caddy for him at the New Zealand Open, trying to win the golf tournament. But when we stood on that practice on that 10th tee on Tuesday to play 9 holes of practice, I felt a feeling that I'd never felt up till that day and since that day. It was just an overwhelming excitement to be on a course that I just absolutely love, and to be showing at the time, the number 1 player in the world how to get around this golf course. I mean, I'd shown so many members how they could get around the golf course, and now I'm going to show Tiger Woods. It was, look, I can picture that feeling today. It was like no other feeling, not even winning all these golf tournaments. It was just unbelievable. And look, if Tiger had one chink in his armour, is that he wasn't the greatest putter on bumpy greens. And due to the excessive amount of rain that we'd had prior to the week and early in the week, the greens got bumpy. It was just a shame the weather wasn't, conducive to what he would like, and he didn't putt great. But I mean, he loved the course, and he's a true. He loves the architecture side of the golf course and he absolutely loved the golf course. And as everyone does that plays there, what a collection of par threes. Tiger's, he loves short par threes, and he just loved that collection of par threes. And look, he has a great understanding of what a good golf course is and what it is. And it was neat. I mean, okay, there was a lot of aspects of the week that didn't go well, but I mean, I couldn't control those parts of it. And it was just, for me, growing up as a child, caddying at Paraparaumu Beach for all those years, from 5 years of age till 13 years of age, caddying at Paraparaumu Beach, and then to come back there a number of years later, caddying for Tiger Woods. I'd caddied a number of times in New Zealand Open, or every time I'd been there, I'd caddied in it. And Corey Pavin won, and Frank Nobilo won. I'd caddied in the tournament, but actually caddied there for Tiger. It was fantastic.